Imagine an art forged in bronze with a level of detail and realism that seems to defy its own time, faces of kings and queens that have been watching us for centuries, not as mere portraits but as living presences, laden with power and mystery. Now imagine that the origin of the civilization that created these wonders is lost in the fog of legend. Welcome to the enigma of the Kingdom of Benin, located in what is today the southwest of Nigeria. This kingdom was not only a bastion of power, but also a cultural melting pot whose legacy still resonates. But how does a civilization capable of such feats come into being? What characters, decisions, and circumstances forged this society that would become a benchmark of sophistication in Africa? To unravel this mystery, we must travel back in time to an era when the equatorial jungle housed various groups and clans. By the end of the Iron Age, around the 11th century, the first settlements began to take shape, drawn by the fertile land and the abundance of resources. These initial communities, organized into clans, not only cultivated the land but also wove the first trade networks, unknowingly laying the foundations for a future empire. It is in this primordial breeding ground where oral tradition speaks of the Ogiso, the kings of the sky. Although details about them are scarce and intertwined with myth, they are credited with the feat of unifying the scattered tribes under a single banner. The decisions of the early Ogiso were fundamental for social cohesion, establishing a system of governance that would foreshadow the future monarchy. However, with centralized power came new challenges. The competition for control of resources and trade routes ignited rivalries and forged alliances that would define the political map of the region. By the middle of the 12th century, the Ogiso Dynasty reached its peak. Under their leadership, a power structure was consolidated that would lay the groundwork for the renowned dynasty of the Obas. Villages transformed, erecting earthen walls and fortifications that shaped a new urban landscape. These defenses were not merely a military necessity, they were a declaration of intent, the symbol of a state aware of its own rise and with the ambition to endure. Nevertheless, this consolidation was not free from conflict. The growing complexity of society and the centralization of power generated cracks in the foundations. The decisions of leaders during this period were critical. Some factions accepted the new authority, seeing in it the promise of stability, while others resisted, fearing the loss of their autonomy. These internal struggles inaugurated a cycle of challenges that would become a constant throughout the history of the kingdom. The consequences of these foundational events were profound and contradictory. Social cohesion was tested by distrust and rivalry, but it was precisely from this tension that the structure of the future monarchy of Benin emerged. The figure of the Ogiso became an archetype of leadership, a complex legacy tinged with both unity and conflict. In the shadows of this history, we wonder what secrets and rivalries remain buried under the weight of time. The history of the Kingdom of Benin is defined in essence as a tale of power, ambition, and conflict. But as we prepare to delve into this narrative, a crucial question arises. How did these primordial decisions and legendary events shape the political and social structure of one of the most remarkable civilizations in Africa? As we move toward the next chapter, we will explore the Ogiso Dynasty, the period that forged the destiny of the kingdom and left an indelible mark on its history. If you're enjoying the video, give it a like and subscribe to see more content from the channel. That instability, however, would be the catalyst for a new era of governance in the Kingdom of Benin. In the twilight of ancient times, the Ogiso dynasty emerged, one of the first and most enigmatic dynasties to rule this prosperous kingdom. In the context of a world where political structures were in constant flux, the reign of the Ogiso would lay the foundations for a complex social and political hierarchy that would endure for centuries. The Ogiso dynasty, whose name translates as King of the Sky, was established during a period when the influence of tribes and lineages was deeply rooted in everyday life. The region was characterized by an amalgamation of kingdoms and clans, each competing for control and preeminence in a landscape where war and diplomacy were constant tools. In this context, the arrival of the Ogiso represented a significant shift. They not only instituted a system of governance, but also integrated cultural and spiritual elements that would resonate in the heart of the people of Benin. The first Ogiso, whose exact name has been lost to time, marked the beginning of this dynasty with decisions that would echo throughout history. He is described as a visionary leader capable of uniting the tribes under a single authority, establishing a government that prioritized cohesion and social well-being. Under his rule, laws were introduced to regulate daily life and trade was encouraged, unifying the peoples in a collective effort to thrive. However, what motivations guided this first king in his pursuit of unity? The Ogiso were not merely rulers. In their role as mediators between the spiritual and earthly realms, they became figures with an almost divine status. Religion and politics were intrinsically linked, and every decision was influenced by a sense of duty towards the deities and their people. The construction of temples and shrines became a priority, reflecting the growing importance of the spiritual in the kingdom's politics. In this sense, the figure of the Ogiso transformed into a symbol of the legitimacy of power, a reference that guided the people in times of uncertainty. As time passed, the Ogiso dynasty faced challenges that would test its strength. Internal power struggles, rivalries among clans, and the pressure from external forces began to loom on the horizon. As the kingdom expanded, the challenge of maintaining cohesion became increasingly urgent. The decisions of the Ogiso in this context would not only affect their legacy, but also define the course of the Kingdom of Benin for generations to come. As the Ogiso dynasty reached its zenith, the political ecosystem of the kingdom became increasingly complex. Nobles and local leaders began to question central authority, leading to a gradual fragmentation of power. The figure of the Ogiso, which had been unifying at first, now found itself at a crossroads. Should it cling to its divine authority or adapt to the new political realities? This tension would become a recurring theme throughout the history of Benin. The events of this era would not only mark the end of the Ogiso dynasty, but would also leave a set of unanswered questions. What happened to the rulers who came after? How did the political structure transform in the Kingdom of Benin? The arrival of Eweka the first Oba of the Eweka dynasty, would radically change the landscape. But the traces of the Ogiso would remain, like persistent shadows in the splendor of the kingdom. The Ogiso dynasty was not merely a chapter in the history of the Kingdom of Benin, it was the foundation upon which a lasting legacy would be built. The blend of political and spiritual power that defined their reign left an imprint that would resonate in the social dynamics of the kingdom. Even in its twilight, the teachings and model of the Ogiso would continue to influence future generations, revealing a mystery that remains a subject of study for historians and scholars. As we explore the echo of the Ogiso dynasty, we prepare for the advent of a new era marked by the rise of Eweka I. How would this new ruler utilize the legacy of his predecessors to transform the Kingdom of Benin? History is about to unveil a transformation that will change the face of governance in this land rich in culture and tradition. This power vacuum, however, would not last forever. A new chapter was about to be written in the history of the Kingdom of Benin. On the threshold of a monumental change, the arrival of Eweka I would mark the beginning of an era that would transform the political and social structure of the kingdom. By the end of the 13th century, the atmosphere in the region was one of instability and a search for identity. The Ogiso dynasty, which had ruled for centuries, faced growing challenges both internal and external. Amidst this turmoil, a new leader emerged, one who would forever change the course of his people. Eweka I, known as the first Oba of the Eweka dynasty, rose to power in a context of disintegration of the ancient Ogiso authority. The figure of the Ogiso, which had been a symbol of unity and continuity, had become increasingly questioned. The growing discontent among local leaders and the people created a power vacuum. It was in this scenario of uncertainty that the echoes of history began to resonate. offering the possibility of a new order. As the legend of Eweka was woven, it was said that he was the son of an Ogiso and a mother from the region, which granted him a lineage that connected him both to the past and to the future. The decisions that Eweka I would make would not only define him as a leader, but would also lay the foundations for the consolidation of his authority. His rise was not merely an act of dynastic legitimacy. It was a bold declaration at a time when the kingdom needed to unify its forces. By proclaiming himself Oba, Eweka I not only claimed the title, but also sought to restore order through strategic alliances and a reconfiguration of political power. But how did Eweka I manage to regain the loyalty of a people who doubted the ancient authority? The unfolding of events surrounding his rise is a mystery in itself. According to chronicles, Eweka I took drastic measures to consolidate his power. It is said that he gathered the leaders of the various ethnicities and clans inhabiting the kingdom, calling for a general council. In this meeting, he sought not only to legitimize himself, but also to create a sense of belonging and unity among the diverse groups. It was a moment when the tradition of orality played a crucial role. Stories about his leadership began to circulate, presenting him not only as a ruler, but as a savior. The consolidation of Eweka I's power was accompanied by a series of reforms that would redefine the political structure of the kingdom. The creation of a new administrative system allowed for better control over territories and resources, establishing a centralized government that would replace the fragmentation that had characterized the Ogiso era. In this process, Eweka I also promoted a change in marital alliances, strengthening his position through unions with powerful houses and emphasizing the importance of the royal family in the political framework. However, the process was not without difficulties. Eweka I faced resistance from those loyal to the old Ogiso dynasty, who saw in his rise a break with the traditions that had governed Benin for generations. These internal conflicts not only threatened his authority, but also exposed the fractures in Benin society. The tensions between Eweka's new followers and the defenders of the old regime posed a troubling question. Could Eweka I truly unite a kingdom marked by division? The immediate consequences of his rise were significant. The emergence of a central figure in leadership helped stabilize the region, and the reforms implemented by Eweka I laid the groundwork for the expansion of the Kingdom of Benin. It is estimated that under his rule the kingdom began to experience growth both territorially and culturally. The arts flourished, and the creation of masterpieces in bronze and other materials became a symbol of the new era that was approaching. Nevertheless, despite the advancements, the echo of opposition still persisted. As the influence of the Oba expanded, the shadows of resistance continued to loom. The story of Eweka I is ultimately an enigma. Was he truly a visionary leader who restored order, or was his rise merely the prelude to new struggles for power that would continue? The arrival of Eweka I to the throne not only marked a milestone in the history of the Kingdom of Benin, it also established a new paradigm of leadership and unity that would influence future generations. The shadow of his figure loomed over the kingdom, guiding his people toward an uncertain future, yet filled with promise. The transition from the Ogiso dynasty to the Eweka dynasty represented a fundamental change in the identity of the kingdom, a change that would resonate through the centuries. With the new order established, the next chapter in the history of the Kingdom of Benin would focus on the consolidation of power under the leadership of Eweka I, exploring how his vision and determination transformed not only his government, but also the people's perception of their identity and their place in the world. How would the first Oba of the Eweka dynasty strengthen his authority and expand his kingdom in a context of constant challenges? The story is just beginning to unfold. The previous instability gradually transformed into an opportunity for growth. At the heart of the Kingdom of Benin, the Obas, with Eweka I at the forefront, began to consolidate a power that sought not only internal stability, but also territorial expansion. At this historical crossroads, strategic alliances and military campaigns were being forged that would shape a kingdom of great influence in the region. The political context of the late 13th and early 14th centuries was marked by uncertainty. Following the arrival of Eweka I, the Eweka dynasty aimed to lay solid foundations for governance, but the challenge was monumental. The fragmentation among clans and tribes, each with its own loyalties and ambitions, represented a considerable obstacle. Nevertheless, the political ingenuity of the Obas, along with their ability to forge alliances, would become the pillar of the kingdom's growth. One of the crucial figures of this era was Eweka I, who not only stood out for his leadership, but also for his negotiation skills. Through strategic marriages with other royal houses, Eweka I managed to unite factions that had previously seen each other as rivals. The figure of the Oba transformed, evolving from a local leader to a symbol of a nation in formation. Thus, marital alliances became a powerful tool, uniting different groups under a single banner and strengthening the social fabric of the kingdom. Meanwhile, territorial expansion was not limited to alliances. Military conquests began to take shape under the command of Eweka I and his successors. Campaigns were carried out with precision, utilizing both force and diplomacy. It is said that the Obas often resorted to diverse tactics. At times, they sent emissaries to neighboring lands to offer peace and prosperity in exchange for loyalty. However, if the response was negative, war became the only viable option. One of the most significant moments of this era was the conquest of the Ishan region, a territory that had been a bastion of resistance. The campaign, led by the son of Eweka I, not only succeeded in subjugating the local population, but also consolidated Benin's reputation as a militarily formidable kingdom. This success attracted the attention of other regions, and soon the echo of Benin's power resonated beyond its borders. The immediate consequences of these actions were profound. The consolidation of the power of the Obas not only generated a sense of unity among the peoples that formed the kingdom, but also established a model of governance based on loyalty and respect. As power became centralized, administrative structures were strengthened, allowing the kingdom to manage its resources and population more effectively. However, in this process of growth, unsettling questions arose. Was this unity real, or merely a facade that concealed latent tensions? What would happen if the alliances broke, or if the conquests became too ambitious? This dilemma became the echo of an era, a mystery that would continue to resonate in the history of the Kingdom of Benin. The quest for power, the need for expansion, and the desire for stability were intertwined in a complex fabric that would continue to challenge the kingdom's leaders in the generations to come. As the shadows of the past lengthened over the kingdom, the growing capital, Benin City, began to take shape as a vibrant political and cultural center. In the next chapter, we will explore how this city became the beating heart of the Kingdom of Benin, a place where art, culture, and power converged in unparalleled development. The consolidation of power transformed the very structure of the Kingdom of Benin. In the 13th century, the winds of change blew strongly. The capital, Benin City, emerged from the shadows of history as the political and cultural heart of an expanding kingdom. In this vibrant metropolis, the echoes of strategic decisions and the pulse of an energetic people would serve as the backdrop for unprecedented development. Historical context. The Renaissance of the Kingdom of Benin is situated in a period of upheaval and transformation. As the Eweka dynasty asserted its authority, the kingdom found itself immersed in a landscape of alliances and conquests. In a world where politics was a game of power and survival, the construction of a city that served as a symbol of the state became imperative. Benin City stood as a beacon of civilization where the social structure, marked by complex hierarchies, began to adopt more defined forms. Noble families, warriors, and artisans intertwined in a dynamic that blended political duties with the preservation of traditions. Key figures and decisions. In this context, the figure of Oguola, one of the most celebrated Obas of the Eweka dynasty, becomes essential. His visionary leadership not only consolidated the power of the kingdom, but also propelled the creation of a capital that reflected the grandeur of his reign. Oguola made bold decisions, the relocation of the seat of power from an older settlement to a new city, where palaces and walls would rise as witnesses to his ambition. The planning of Benin City involved a meticulous approach, which included the construction of a defense system, interconnected roads, and of course the creation of sacred spaces such as the temple of the deity Olokun, symbolizing the connection of the people with their ancestors and their environment. Development of events. Over time, the earthen walls and wooden structures began to take shape. The crafts of blacksmiths and sculptors filled the streets with life, while trade flourished thanks to the strategic location of the city. The prosperity of Benin City attracted merchants and travelers from distant lands who brought with them not only goods but also ideas and cultural influences. This melting pot of interactions turned the city into a hub of exchange, where the art of metallurgy would reach levels of refinement that would astonish the world. Among the significant events of this era, the construction of the royal palace stands out, a complex that not only served as the residence of the Oba, but was conceived as a symbol of the king's divinity and his mandate over the people. The city walls, which constantly expanded, became a reflection of the kingdom's growing ambition and power. The ceremonies and festivals held in its streets reverberated with the echo of a rich culture deeply rooted in tradition, where art and religion intertwined. Immediate consequences. The growth of Benin City brought with it a boom in culture and economy, but it also generated tensions. Competition among local elites for the Oba's favor intensified, and alliances were formed and dissolved rapidly. The political structure of the city became a web of loyalties and rivalries, where each decision of the Oba could alter the balance of power. Nevertheless, the consolidation of Benin City as the capital established a model of governance that would endure even in the face of the adversities to come, a legacy that would resonate through the centuries. The enigma of the chapter, however, amid this splendor, a troubling question arose. Could a city built on such foundations of ambition and power truly withstand the challenges that the future would bring? The shadows looming over Benin City heralded turbulent times, and the echoes of past decisions would resonate in its future. As the city flourished, so too did the dangers that threatened its existence. With an eye on an uncertain horizon, the story of Benin City invites us to reflect on the delicate balance between power and culture, a theme that will lead us to explore the artistic and cultural expressions that define the identity of the kingdom in the next chapter. How were conquests and power translated into manifestations of art? What legacies were etched in bronze and ceramics? And how would these artifacts tell the story of a people that refused to be forgotten? The answer awaits us in the world of art and culture in the Kingdom of Benin. If you're enjoying the video, give it a like and subscribe to see more content from the channel. The relentless search for the identity of the Kingdom of Benin was not limited to its political and military structure. At the heart of this vibrant civilization, art and culture emerged as fundamental pillars that defined its essence. As we explore the richness of artistic expressions in Benin, we find ourselves in a territory where creativity and spirituality intertwine, forming a legacy that resonates through the centuries. The historical context of the Kingdom of Benin in the 15th century was characterized by an unprecedented cultural flourishing. Under the reign of the early Obas, especially Ewa the Great, the foundations of a state that revered aesthetics and the symbolism of power were established. The city of Benin, with its grand wall and ornate palaces, stood as a center of exchange not only of goods but also of ideas. The influence of African traditions intertwined with the currents of cultures arriving through trade, creating an environment conducive to artistic innovation. In this climate of effervescence, cultural manifestations began to take shape, reflecting the beliefs, history, and daily life of its people. The key figures in this narrative of art were undoubtedly the Obas. Ewa the Great, one of the most renowned, was not only a military leader but also a patron of art and culture. Under his mandate, workshops of artists specializing in the creation of bronzes, ivories, and wooden sculptures were established. Each work was a testament to the technical skill and profound symbolism that characterized the worldview of Benin. The famous bronze heads, which would represent the ancient Obas, were crafted with a precision that still astonishes contemporary historians and artists. But what motivated these artists to capture their reality in such elaborate forms? Were they seeking immortality? Or was it a reflection of their divine and earthly surroundings? The development of events surrounding art in the Kingdom of Benin can be divided into several significant stages. Initially, art was predominantly religious, with figures and masks representing deities and spirits. Later, it diversified to include portraits of royalty and scenes of daily life. Ceremonies such as the Igi festival became the ideal setting to showcase these works. During these rituals, masks and sculptures came to life, allowing spectators to connect with the past and the sacred. Dance and art merged in a spectacle of colors and sounds that celebrated the collective identity of the people of Benin. However, art was not merely a matter of aesthetics, it was a vehicle of power. The works were used to communicate the authority of the Oba and his connection to the divine. The bronze heads that adorned the palaces were more than mere decorations. They were emblems of royal legitimacy. Each creation was imbued with a profound meaning that transcended its materiality. The elites of the kingdom, in commissioning these works, sought not only to beautify their surroundings but also to leave an indelible mark on history. But how was this relationship between art and power perceived in a kingdom where life and death were intertwined in complex rituals? The immediate consequences of this artistic flourishing were profound. The production of art in the Kingdom of Benin not only strengthened social cohesion but also attracted the attention of European traders who were beginning to cross the ocean. Art and culture became a calling card for the kingdom, a symbol of its greatness and sophistication. However, this admiration also brought with it greed. As Europeans arrived, the art of Benin became an object of desire, and the first transactions with European traders laid the groundwork for a conflict-ridden future. Could it be that art, which had been an emblem of unity and strength, would become a catalyst for exploitation? The enigma surrounding the art of the Kingdom of Benin is its duality, a symbol of identity and an object of trade. How is it possible that what was created to celebrate the life and culture of a people was also used as a tool for exploitation and dispossession? The history of Benin's art is ultimately a mirror reflecting the complexity of the human experience, a reminder that beauty and power often coexist in the same space. As we delve into the following centuries, the art and culture of the Kingdom of Benin would face unprecedented challenges. Interactions with European traders would not only transform the economy, but also reconfigure the perception of art and its value. What would happen to these masterpieces in a world where trade and conquest began to define relationships between cultures? The answer to this question leads us to the next chapter, where Trans-Saharan Trade becomes the backdrop of a story of exchanges and tensions that would mark the fate of the Kingdom of Benin. The prosperity of the kingdom would soon unveil the complex networks that sustained it. The splendor of Benin was forged not only in its walls and in its art, but also in the echoes of a vibrant and strategic trade that traversed the vast Sahara. Trans-Saharan Trade, a phenomenon that marked the history of Africa, became a fundamental pillar for the economy of the Kingdom of Benin, cementing its position as a key player in the exchange of goods and culture. In the lands surrounding Benin, the climate and geographical conditions created a favorable environment for the development of trade routes. The Tuareg nomads, along with merchants from various ethnic groups, ventured into the desert, transporting not only goods but also ideas and cultures. In this context, the Kingdom of Benin emerged as a meeting point between the north and the south, a crossroads where alliances were forged and ties were woven that transcended borders. The leaders of the kingdom, particularly the Obas, played a crucial role in shaping these trade dynamics. Oba Ovonramwen, a prominent monarch in the history of Benin, understood the importance of trade not only as a source of wealth but as a tool of power. Under his reign, the kingdom expanded and established trade connections with regions as distant as the Hausa Empire and the lands of the Maghreb. The strategic decisions of Eweka, who promoted the creation of markets and the construction of safe roads, facilitated a constant flow of goods from gold and salt to textiles and ivory. The events of Trans-Saharan Trade unfolded in a context of competition and interaction. The caravans crossing the desert carried with them not only products but also stories and traditions that enriched the cultural fabric of Benin. However, economic prosperity also generated tensions. Rivalries among different trading groups, as well as incursions by external powers, complicated the situation. What secrets lay hidden behind the transactions and agreements? What shadows loomed over the merchants who risked their lives in the desert? In this complex scenario, trade was not merely a matter of material exchange, but a reflection of power relations. The influence of Benin's merchants extended beyond the kingdom's borders, establishing ties with city-states and neighboring kingdoms. However, the dependence on the wealth generated by trade also came with a cost. The history of Benin shows us how the economy can become a double-edged sword, where material power and vulnerability coexist. The immediate consequences of Trans-Saharan trade were profound. The economy of Benin thrived, allowing for the development of a culture rich in art and expression. However, this boom also attracted the attention of external forces. The arrival of European merchants in the 15th century would begin to change the rules of the game, introducing new challenges and opportunities. The tension between the old order and new influences began to take shape, leaving open questions about the future of the kingdom. Would Benin be prepared to face the changes that lay ahead? The enigma of this era centers on how a kingdom that had managed to consolidate its power through trade and diplomacy could adapt to a transforming world. Would it be able to maintain its sovereignty in the face of emerging new powers? The answers to these questions are not only crucial for understanding the past of Benin, but also offer lessons on resilience and adaptation in times of change. As Trans-Saharan trade continued its course, the first signs of contact with the European world began to emerge on the horizon. The history of the Kingdom of Benin was entering a new stage, where the winds of exploration and global trade would start to influence its destiny. Thus, as the caravans crossed the desert, the future of the kingdom hung by a thread, ready to be woven into a new tapestry of cultural and political interactions. The commercial rise would soon open the doors to a new and unknown horizon. In the 15th century, the Kingdom of Benin, in full expansion and consolidation, was preparing for an encounter that would mark a turning point in its history. The echoes of ancient trade routes resonated in the minds of ambitious European explorers who saw in the African lands an enigma to unravel and a market to conquer. The political and social environment preceding the first European contacts was complex and vibrant. The kingdom was under the leadership of the Eweka dynasty, which had consolidated its power and expanded its territories through strategic alliances and a flourishing trade. Benin, with its radiant capital, had become a melting pot of culture, art, and commerce that attracted both merchants from surrounding regions and adventurers from distant lands. But who were these navigators who dared to cross the ocean in search of wealth and territories? As European powers began to explore new maritime routes, figures such as the Portuguese navigator João Afonso de Aveiro emerged as pioneers of these encounters. Aveiro, recognized for his skill in navigation and his knowledge of ocean currents, would be one of the first to reach the shores of the Kingdom of Benin. In 1472, after a journey filled with uncertainties, his ships landed on this unknown land, where a rich and complex culture awaited discovery. The Portuguese, in their quest for trade and exploration, encountered a well-established system of exchange. The merchants of Benin, shrewd and experienced, had cultivated relationships with various regions through trans-Saharan routes, granting them a high degree of autonomy and power. The arrival of the Europeans, however, brought not only opportunities for trade but also an air of tension and distrust. The decisions of leaders both in Benin and in European powers laid the groundwork for a delicate balance that would ultimately be disrupted by the desire for power and wealth. The relationship between the Kingdom of Benin and European merchants initially developed under a veil of mutual curiosity. The Portuguese, intrigued by the wealth of gold, ivory and spices that the kingdom offered, began to establish trading posts. In these encounters, words and intentions intertwined in a power play where each party sought to maximize its benefits. Benin, in its early contacts, displayed a mix of openness and caution. The Obas, aware of the importance of trade for their prosperity, decided to establish relations with the newcomers. The figure of the Oba, a symbol of power and authority, became a bridge between two worlds. However, the echoes of history were already beginning to whisper warnings about the consequences that could arise from these encounters. Could the ambition of the Europeans transform the very essence of the kingdom? As the years progressed, interactions intensified. The Europeans were not only interested in trade, they also sought information, knowledge about routes, and at times attempted to establish diplomatic ties. However, each step taken by European merchants into the interior of Africa also revealed a backdrop of ambition and exploitation. The decisions of those early explorers, along with the receptiveness of the leaders of Benin, would give rise to an intertwining of interests that would change the course of both societies. The immediate consequences of these encounters were significant. The exchange of goods and knowledge fostered cultural and economic enrichment in Benin, but it also sowed the seed of dependency. The arrival of new goods, ideas, and European technologies began to influence the daily lives of the inhabitants of Benin, altering their traditional way of life. However, the shadow of exploitation loomed on the horizon, and soon the intentions of the Europeans would reveal themselves to be more complex than initially imagined. The enigma of these first contacts becomes evident. Was this encounter a crossing of fate that propelled Benin toward a future of prosperity? Or was it the beginning of a series of events that would lead to its eventual dispossession and decline? What secrets still awaited in the depths of these nascent relationships? History had yet to reveal the magnitude of the impact that these encounters would have on the kingdom. As the echoes of the initial interactions resonated in the lands of Benin, time advanced mercilessly. The era of the Warrior Obas was beginning to take shape, a time when the kingdom, now more than ever, would be compelled to defend its identity, its wealth, and its autonomy against a constantly changing world and growing greed. History was about to write a new chapter, and with it, the struggles and challenges that would shape the legacy of the Kingdom of Benin. The new commercial dynamic would usher in a decisive era for the Kingdom of Benin, a time marked by the military feats of the Warrior Obas in the 15th century as European powers began to chart their trade routes to Africa. The Kingdom of Benin stabilized under the leadership of a dynasty that not only aspired to maintain its sovereignty, but also to expand its territories through bold military campaigns. In this context, the Obas, warriors in the fullest sense of the word, emerged as central figures in the defense and expansion of the kingdom. The Warrior Obas, led by leaders such as Eweka the Great, were not only rulers but also military strategists who conducted campaigns that would resonate throughout history. Eweka, who ascended to the throne around the year 1440, was instrumental in transforming the kingdom into a formidable military power. His ambition knew no bounds. Under his command, Benin not only defended itself against external invasions but also waged war on neighboring territories, consolidating its influence in the region. In this era of conflicts and conquests, the political environment was in constant flux. The nobility of Benin, which had played a prominent role in the kingdom's politics, began to be challenged by the centralized power of the Oba. Eweka, with his vision of a unified and strong kingdom, made bold decisions that surprised his contemporaries. Among them was the reorganization of the army, which not only increased its size but also improved discipline and military strategy. But how did Eweka achieve such transformation in a time when resources were limited and threats imminent? The events of this time unfolded in a series of confrontations that, although often lost in the labyrinth of time, left an echo of bravery and resilience. Eweka led campaigns against neighboring peoples, such as the Igbos and the Oyo, thus expanding his territory and securing vital trade routes. Victories in these battles not only strengthened his position but also fed the legend of the warrior Oba. However, each victory came at a cost. War not only meant territorial expansion but also the reconfiguration of alliances and the creation of enemies that in the long run could become threats. The immediate consequences of these campaigns were profound. The expansion of Benin led to a cultural and military exchange with other peoples, as well as an increase in the kingdom's wealth. War trophies such as captives and goods became symbols of power and success, and the influence of Benin extended beyond its borders. However, the enigma underlying this era of glory is unsettling. At what cost was this expansion achieved? The victories of the warrior Obas may have sown the seeds of future discord and internal conflicts. As history progresses, the echo of the decisions made by the warrior Obas resonates through time. Were they truly the heroes that history has painted, or did their ambitions leave a legacy of divisions and struggles that would mark the future of the Kingdom of Benin? As we explore the diplomacy that followed this era of war, we find ourselves at a crossroads where history becomes more complex and multifaceted. The next stage of the narrative will take us to delve into the diplomatic strategies that the Obas employed to maintain stability in a kingdom that, despite its military greatness, faced constant internal and external challenges. That was the era when the Kingdom of Benin began to weave a network of complex and sophisticated relationships. With a consolidated political structure and strong leadership, the Obas faced the challenge of maintaining stability and power in an environment where trade and foreign influence intertwined with local traditions. Diplomacy would become an essential tool, a kind of art in which the Obas, such as Eweka the Great and his successors, would transform into masters. In a context where military power could not always guarantee security, the Obas of Benin opted for dialogue and negotiation. This approach sought not only to preserve peace but also to project the greatness of the kingdom before its neighbors and potential allies. The ability to negotiate with European traders, as well as with other African nations, became a central axis of Benin's politics. Thus, the Kingdom of Benin positioned itself as a relevant actor in an international scenario that was beginning to change at a dizzying pace. One of the most prominent figures in this intricate diplomatic dance was Eweka the Great, who ruled in the 15th century. Eweka was not only a great conqueror but also a visionary diplomat. His reign marked the beginning of a period in which Benin consolidated itself as a center of trade and culture. Eweka understood that the stability of the kingdom depended not only on its army but also on the ability to forge alliances that would reinforce its position. Under his leadership, the kingdom established relationships with Portuguese traders, who, attracted by the wealth of Benin, became essential trading partners. The decisions made by the Obas during this period were crucial. Instead of rejecting European influence, Eweka and his successors chose to integrate it into their political system. This not only involved negotiating advantageous trade agreements but also accepting some of the customs and technologies of the Europeans. It was a balancing act where each move had to be calculated to prevent external influence from becoming overpowering. But was it really so? To what extent did these agreements benefit the kingdom, and when did they begin to represent a threat? As trade expanded, so did tensions. Alliances with European countries, although lucrative, came with an inherent risk. the possibility that these powers would attempt to impose their will on the kingdom. The decisions of the Obas, in this sense, had to be made with caution. History shows us that often, diplomacy is a double-edged sword where silence can be as powerful as words and friendship as fleeting as a whisper in the wind. The key events of this era reveal a constant tug-of-war between the independence of the kingdom and the attraction of powerful European nations. The arrival of the Portuguese, first as traders and then as competitors, forced the Obas to act swiftly. In a turn of remarkable cunning, some leaders of Benin chose to establish diplomatic relations with other European powers, such as the British and the Dutch, to counteract the growing Portuguese influence. This multifaceted approach was not only innovative but also highlighted the political expertise of the Obas. The immediate consequences of these decisions were palpable. Trade flourished, leading Benin into a period of unprecedented prosperity. Natural resources such as ivory and pepper became bargaining chips in negotiations, elevating the status of the kingdom in the international arena. However, this prosperity also brought with it a series of dilemmas that the kingdom would have to face. Could the desire for wealth lead the Obas to compromise their values and sovereignty? The enigma surrounding this phase of the history of the Kingdom of Benin is complex. The ability of the Obas to navigate a transforming world raises questions about the true cost of diplomacy. Was the pursuit of alliances the key to the stability of the kingdom, or a path that would eventually lead it into the shadows of colonization? History often conceals answers, leaving behind an echo of uncertainty. In a world where the slave trade was beginning to establish itself as a powerful force, the diplomacy of Benin faced an even greater challenge. The decisions made by the Obas in this new reality would have repercussions that extended far beyond their borders. Thus, the legacy of Benin's diplomacy intertwines with the slave trade, opening a dark chapter in the history of the kingdom. The following decisions would chart the course of the kingdom and its relationship with the outside world, plunging Benin into a historical enigma that still endures today. Diplomacy would soon be put to the test by a crossroads that would change the fate of the Kingdom of Benin. As Trans-Saharan trade flourished, the arrival of European traders in the 15th century brought with it a dark new chapter: the slave trade. This phenomenon would not only alter the economic structure of the kingdom, but also reconfigure its international relations, leaving an indelible mark on its history. In the early decades of the 16th century, the Kingdom of Benin, under the leadership of Oba Ovonramwen, began to consolidate itself as a regional power. The court of Benin stood as a beacon of wealth and culture in the heart of West Africa. However, the arrival of Europeans eager to establish trade routes introduced a new element into the power dynamics: the trafficking of human beings. The demand for slaves in the New World, driven by sugar and tobacco plantations, would generate a trade ecosystem that reverberated along the African coasts. The decisions of the leaders of Benin, particularly the Oba, would be crucial in this new context. Eweka, a ruler with a clear vision of state, identified in the slave trade an opportunity to strengthen his kingdom. Through strategic alliances with European traders such as the Portuguese, Benin began to actively participate in the Atlantic trade. However, this collaboration was imbued with moral ambiguity. To what extent is the sacrifice of some justified for the well-being of others? What shadow loomed over the decisions of a king seeking the greatness of his kingdom? The slave trade became a pillar of Benin's economy. Local traders, in their quest for precious metals and European goods, began to capture and sell people from neighboring towns and, at times, from their own territory, triggering tensions in communities that had once been supportive. The chains of slavery extended, connecting Africa with the Americas in a way the world had never seen. In this context, Benin emerged as a center of exchange, where the echoes of transactions resonated in the halls of the court. As the slave trade intensified, the international relations of the kingdom also underwent a radical transformation. Europeans, especially the British and the Dutch, began to compete for control of trade routes. This new balance of power brought with it a mix of diplomacy and conflict. The decisions of the Oba and his advisors became more complex, as each alliance could mean an advantage or a disadvantage in the pursuit of resources and power. However, this commercial prosperity did not translate into lasting peace. Internal tensions began to surface, fueled by competition among nobles and factions seeking the favor of European traders. This internal fire, stoked by the thirst for wealth, led to a series of conflicts that eroded the social cohesion of the kingdom. Could it be that the very trade that had brought fortune could ultimately dismantle the structure of the kingdom? The immediate consequences of Benin's participation in the slave trade were profound. The kingdom's economy, initially driven by the export of products such as pepper and palm oil, was transformed by the growing demand for slave labor. The most vulnerable communities became targets for capture, creating an atmosphere of distrust and fragmentation. Furthermore, the dependence on the slave trade began to create an unsustainable economy, thriving in the short term but sowing the seeds of a future crisis. The echo of this period still resonates today in the collective memory of the region. The lingering question is, what legacy did this trade leave on the identity of the people of Benin? How did they confront the duality of prosperity and suffering that characterized those years? As wealth flowed into the court of Benin, the shadow of human suffering grew denser, creating an enigma that challenges historians and descendants alike. With each decision made in those halls of power, the fate of the Kingdom of Benin became intertwined with that of millions of souls trapped in a cycle of trade and exploitation. The history of Benin, marked by its brilliant culture and complex international relations, stands at a critical juncture. The arrival of new powers and the rise of bronze art are poised to shape a new chapter in its legacy. Thus, the horizon of Benin darkened as the shadow of the slave trade expanded. What had begun as an opportunity transformed into a moral and political dilemma. The history not only of a kingdom but of an entire civilization hung in the balance. In this context of change and transformation, the next chapter will take us to explore the rise of bronze art in the Kingdom of Benin, a symbol of power and culture that, despite adversities, would continue to resonate through time and space. How will artistic splendor intertwine with the shadows of its past? Could art be a form of resistance against an uncertain fate? The complexity of the era was accompanied by a cultural flourishing that would resonate through the centuries. At the heart of the Kingdom of Benin, while internal and external tensions threatened its stability, an artistic manifestation emerged that not only symbolized power but also encapsulated the very essence of Benin's culture, the art of bronze. This chapter delves into the enigma of how bronze transformed into an emblem of power and culture. A narrative that intertwines history, politics, and creativity. Historical context. In the 15th century, the Kingdom of Benin found itself at a crossroads. The Eweka dynasty, under the leadership of Oba Ovonramwen, had consolidated a strong and centralized government, but it also faced the first signs of external pressure. Relations with Europeans, initially commercial, began to complicate, and the slave trade started to flourish, bringing both wealth and conflict. This environment of tension and ambition provided the perfect breeding ground for the development of an art that reflected both the political power and the spirituality of its people. Key figures and decisions. At the center of this artistic transformation was Oba Ovonramwen, a visionary leader who understood the power of art as a tool for propaganda and social cohesion. Ovonramwen encouraged the production of bronze sculptures, not merely as adornments, but as declarations of power that captured the history and tradition of the kingdom. Alongside him, a group of highly skilled artisans known as the casters emerged as the creative elite of Benin. Their ability to work with bronze and create intricate reliefs became a symbol of skill and prestige. Development of events. As the Kingdom of Benin prospered, the techniques of bronze casting were perfected. The casters employed a lost wax method that allowed them to create detailed and complex pieces, from heads of Obas to reliefs that narrated stories of military victories and religious ceremonies. These works were not mere adornments. Each piece was a testament to the royal lineage and the feats of the Obas, immortalizing their achievements in metal. During Eweka's reign, it is estimated that thousands of art pieces were produced, each with a profound meaning and a ceremonial purpose. The bronze masterpieces also began to be used in rituals and ceremonies, reinforcing their role as symbols of power. Around the court, these objects became vehicles of visual communication, sending a clear message. The Oba was the mediator between the spiritual and earthly realms, and his authority was backed by the strength of tradition and artistic skill. However, despite this apparent unity, the art of bronze also reflected the tensions of the time, a duality that raised questions about the nature of power. Was art a refuge or a tool of oppression? Immediate consequences. The rise of bronze art had an immediate impact on the social and political structure of the Kingdom of Benin. The production of these objects not only elevated the status of artisans, but also created a demand for labor and resources, which in turn boosted the local economy. Works of art began to be valued not only for their beauty, but for their ability to connect individuals with their history and cultural identity. However, over time, this artistic wealth also attracted the attention of European colonial powers, who would see in these objects not only a symbol of beauty, but a target for plunder. The enigma of the chapter. As the art of bronze reached new heights, a troubling question arose. What secrets lay hidden in the beauty of these works? Were they merely reflections of glory, or did they also embody the tensions and conflicts of a transforming kingdom? The echo of these questions resonates in the shadows of history, inviting viewers to explore beyond the dazzling surface of the art. As the Kingdom of Benin entered a period of artistic splendor, the political tensions that had begun to brew threatened to overflow. Art, a symbol of power and culture, could not protect itself from the impending changes. In the next chapter, we will explore how these internal crises and successions began to affect the stability of the kingdom, leaving a complicated legacy that would resonate through time. The artistic splendor would soon manifest alongside more complex and profound forms of crisis within the Kingdom of Benin. In a period of growing ambition, the shadows of internal insecurity began to cast themselves over the horizon of the kingdom, where power struggles rose like echoes of ancient rivalries. The 18th century witnessed the crumbling of political cohesion, marked by dynastic disputes and challenges that threatened to destabilize the very structure of the kingdom. The historical context of this period was imbued with tensions. After generations of strong leadership under the Warrior Obas, the kingdom had reached a remarkable level of cultural and economic sophistication. However, as the Obas became more powerful, they also became more vulnerable to political intrigue and struggles for power. The Eweka dynasty, which had established a new order, found itself at a crossroads. The system of succession, which had traditionally based its legitimacy on direct bloodlines, began to face questioning that arose both from within and outside the royal circle. The key figures in this enigma were undoubtedly the Obas themselves and their court. Oba Eweka II, who ruled in the first half of the 18th century, found himself trapped in a labyrinth of ambitions and conspiracies. His reign, although initially promising, turned into a battleground of divided loyalties and rival factions. The growing influence of the nobles and the emergence of new political actors such as merchants and rival clans further complicated the situation. The decisions made by these leaders, some of which were motivated by the need to maintain control, often exacerbated instability rather than mitigating it. As the struggles for succession intensified, the kingdom was shaken by a series of internal crises. The death of an Oba often triggered a period of uncertainty, where the lack of a clear successor could lead to violent confrontations. In this context, the figure of the Oba became a symbol of unity, but also of division. Aspirants to the throne, often supported by powerful factions, launched into a fratricidal struggle that left devastating repercussions. What secrets of ambition and betrayal lay hidden behind these struggles were the very intrigues that had forged the kingdom now causing its disintegration. The development of these events was marked by episodes of violence and distrust. The nobles and generals in search of power did not hesitate to employ tactics of deception and assassination to eliminate their rivals. Alliances, which had previously served to strengthen the kingdom, became betrayals that eroded trust among the leaders. In an almost tragic narrative, murders of aspirants to the throne and revolts by nobles who, dissatisfied with the leadership, sought to restore their own authority, followed one after another. As a result, the social fabric of the kingdom wore thin, leaving scars that would endure in the collective memory. The immediate consequences of these struggles were severe. Political instability led to a weakening of central power, which in turn facilitated the emergence of conflicts at the kingdom's borders. Incursions by external groups, drawn by the fragility of the Kingdom of Benin, became more frequent. Merchants who had previously thrived in a secure environment began to fear for their roots and their lives. The economy, which had flourished thanks to Trans-Saharan Trade and diplomacy, was threatened by internal chaos. Was the kingdom, which had been a beacon of power and culture, destined to fall into oblivion? As the struggles continued, the enigma surrounding successions and the legitimacy of leaders became increasingly complex. Were these crises simply the result of the unchecked ambition of a few, or did they reflect a deeper weakness in the political structure of the kingdom? The questions remain, like shadows on the path of a legacy that still struggles to find its place in history. Over time, the Kingdom of Benin would move towards a new chapter in its history, one that would bring with it radical changes and even greater challenges. The arrival of the British would begin to reconfigure the political and social landscape, pushing the kingdom into a new era of uncertainty. How would the inhabitants of Benin confront these new external pressures, and what secrets from their past would aid them in the struggle to preserve their autonomy? The answer to these questions might be on the verge of being revealed in the next chapter, The Arrival of the British. If you're enjoying the video, give it a like and subscribe to see more content from the channel. Internal struggles would soon open the doors to new alliances and challenges. As the Kingdom of Benin grappled with its own instability, the echo of a new power began to resonate on the horizon, the British Empire. By the end of the 19th century, British ships were navigating the waters of the Gulf of Guinea, carrying with them both the weight of imperial ambition and the promise of trade and prosperity. Benin, with its rich culture and strategic location, would become a point of interest for the British. The historical context of this encounter is crucial for understanding the relationship that would be established between the two. During the 18th century, the Kingdom of Benin had flourished, being a vibrant centre of trade and culture. However, internal tensions and power struggles began to weaken it. In this environment, the British Empire, which had already been involved in the trade of slaves and other goods, saw the opportunity to extend its influence. The key figures in this period are, on one hand, Oba Ovonramwen, a charismatic leader facing modernization and external pressures, and on the other, British merchants and their representatives, such as the trader John Phillips, whose vision of a mutually beneficial trade relationship was, at its core, a projection of British colonial interests. Ovonramwen, aware of the importance of trade, decided to open the doors to the British, seeking to establish relationships that could strengthen his kingdom. However, this decision was fraught with ambiguity and risk. The development of events that followed this decision was both complex and nuanced. In 1883, Ovonramwen signed a trade treaty with the British, allowing British merchants to establish themselves in Benin. This treaty not only sought to promote the exchange of goods from palm oil to ivory, but also served as an attempt to curb the advance of other European powers in the region. The Oba hoped that by allying with the British, he could secure the stability of his kingdom against the growing threats surrounding it. However, what began as a trade exchange soon transformed into a game of intrigue. The arrival of the British not only brought products and technology, but also a desire for control. Merchants began to exceed the limits of trade, attempting to influence the political decisions of Benin. But was prosperity truly what they sought? Ovonramwen, increasingly aware of the true intentions of the British, found himself caught in a dilemma: to maintain the autonomy of his kingdom or succumb to the pressure of a rising imperial power. The immediate consequences of these events were palpable. The economy of Benin was altered by the influx of British goods, but tensions also began to arise between British merchants and local elites. Ovonramwen, struggling to maintain balance, found himself at a crossroads. The decisions he made during this phase would be decisive for the future of the kingdom. In an attempt to reaffirm his power, the Oba began to limit British access to the most valuable resources, which in turn provoked discontent among British merchants and with it, the onset of a latent conflict. The enigma that lingers in the air is: to what extent was the British ambition for trade and influence destined to transform the Kingdom of Benin into a mere pawn in their imperial game? Could Oba Ovonramwen have foreseen the consequences of his decisions? As the Kingdom of Benin entered the decade of 1890, the shadows of war and resistance began to loom on the horizon, foreshadowing an imminent confrontation that would forever change the fate of this ancient kingdom. The relationships that had been carefully forged would become the backdrop of a tragedy that would unfold in 1897, when the British punitive expedition would lead to the fall of the Kingdom of Benin and the dissolution of its cultural legacy. The question persists: could the Kingdom of Benin have avoided the impending catastrophe, or was it destined to become yet another chapter in colonial history? The answers, like many truths of the past, remain hidden in the shadows of time. The latent conflict would soon overflow the accumulated tensions between the Kingdom of Benin and the British Empire. In the decade of 1890, the atmosphere was palpable, an echo of distrust and ambition resonating in the interactions between the two powers. The Kingdom of Benin, a bastion of culture and power on the southwest coast of Africa, had maintained its independence through centuries of shrewd diplomacy and military strength. However, British colonial greed loomed on the horizon, like an ominous shadow foretelling a drastic change in the kingdom's fate. As relations deteriorated, the decisions made by leaders both in Benin and in London would take a course that would forever change the trajectory of history. On the British side, the colonial government, led by the governor of Lagos, Sir Harry Rawson, sought to expand British control in the region, despite warnings about the consequences of military intervention. The growing influence of the ivory trade and the need for a secure route inland led to a punitive expedition that would become a dark milestone. Meanwhile, in the Kingdom of Benin, Oba Ovonramwen Nogbaisi found himself at a crossroads. As the leader of the kingdom, he had inherited a legacy of resistance and splendor, but also the challenges of a changing world. His decision to reject British demands for access to resources and to accept the imposition of colonial trade placed him in the crosshairs of British authorities. In his mind, the desire to preserve the autonomy of the Kingdom of Benin clashed with the reality of an empire that had already demonstrated its willingness to resort to force to achieve its objectives. The conflict erupted in 1896 when a British delegation composed of officials and merchants was sent to Benin in hopes of normalizing relations. However, the mission was met with hostility and distrust. The Oba's refusal to accept the conditions imposed by the British resulted in a turn of events with fatal consequences. The delegation was captured, and the members who were not killed were held as prisoners. This act, which the British would see as a provocation, ignited the fuse that would lead to the punitive expedition. In December of 1896, the British government decided to launch a military offensive with the aim of punishing Benin and restoring order. Under the command of Captain Philip A.B.L. Campbell, a force of approximately 1,200 men prepared to march into the heart of the kingdom. This army, composed mostly of Indian and British soldiers, advanced in an atmosphere of superiority, convinced that their military might would guarantee them a quick and decisive victory. But could British pride blind them to the determination of a people who had resisted for centuries? The journey to the city of Benin was long and arduous. As the British troops ventured deeper into the territory, they began to experience the resistance of Benin warriors who defended their home with ferocity. Ambushes, nighttime attacks, and the tactical cunning of the defenders surprised the invaders, revealing that the Kingdom of Benin had not lost its capacity to fight for its autonomy. Finally, in February of 1897, the British arrived at the gates of the city of Benin, where they encountered a landscape that reflected the kingdom's splendor. However, the city was devoid of its former glory, as the atmosphere of war had left deep scars. In an attempt to avoid further bloodshed, Oba Ovonramwen sent envoys to negotiate, but the British response was unequivocal: surrender or total destruction. That moment of decision sealed the kingdom's fate. The assault on the city of Benin was brutal. In a torrent of fire and destruction, British forces ravaged the city, dismantling its infrastructure and looting its cultural treasures. The bronzes of Benin, masterpieces of casting that symbolized the greatness and legacy of the kingdom, were stripped away and sent to Europe, where they would be displayed in museums far from their home. The fall of the Kingdom of Benin was completed swiftly, and the shadow of defeat loomed over the people. The immediate consequences of the expedition were devastating. Not only was the autonomy of the Kingdom of Benin lost, but its political and social structures were dismantled. Oba Ovonramwen was captured and subsequently exiled, while his people faced an uncertain future under British colonial rule. The memory of resistance would become a shared story, a reminder of a kingdom that once shone with its own light. However, the enigma of the punitive expedition of 1897 remains. What truly motivated British aggression? Was it a simple desire for geopolitical control, or were deeper and more complex interests at stake? The questions linger in the air like ghosts, challenging historians to unravel the hidden motivations that led to this conflict. As history continues, it becomes evident that the legacy of the Kingdom of Benin was not easily erased. Its culture, though battered, found ways to resist and adapt, leaving a trail of resilience in the collective memory. The fall of the city of Benin would not be the end of the story, but the beginning of a new chapter of resistance and rediscovery that will be explored in the next chapter. The exile of Oba Ovonramwen and the struggles that followed his banishment. The escalation of tensions would soon lead to an imminent conflict. By the end of the 19th century, the Kingdom of Benin, with its rich history of power and culture, found itself at the crossroads of a new era. The complex web of alliances and rivalries, both internal and external, was woven in a context of growing interest and pressure from European colonial powers. The British Empire, in its quest to expand its territories, saw in Benin a key piece on the African chessboard. Prior to the events that would mark the fall of the city of Benin, the tension between the British and the kingdom had been rising. Oba Ovonramwen, leader of the kingdom since 1888, faced a monumental challenge: the need to balance trade with Europeans and the preservation of his people's sovereignty. The arrival of British traders and their ambition to control trade routes created an atmosphere of distrust. Diplomatic relations, which had once been the foundation of understanding between both parties, began to crumble, leaving the kingdom vulnerable. In this delicate context, the figure of Sahari Rawson, commander of the British forces in the region, became crucial. Rawson, an experienced military man, advocated for a policy of force to subdue the African kingdoms that resisted imperialist advances. In his mind, the capture of the city of Benin not only represented a military victory, but also a symbol of British authority over Africa. But what motivations drove Rawson and his government to carry out a punitive expedition in a kingdom that had, until then, maintained a precarious balance? The spark that would ignite the conflict was the so-called Incident of the Mission of 1896. In an attempt to establish more direct relations, The British sent a diplomatic mission to Benin. However, the British ambassadors were arrested on the accusation of being spies. The news of this event spread quickly, and the British Empire, feeling that its honour was at stake, decided to retaliate. In January of 1897, a military expedition was organised under the pretext of restoring order and protecting British interests in the region. Thus began the siege of the city of Benin, a capital that until that moment had been a centre of power, culture and art. On the 9th of February in 1897, the British forces, well armed and organised, advanced toward the city. What was presented as a necessary intervention soon transformed into an act of aggression. The resistance of the warriors of Benin, although brave, was quickly overwhelmed by the technological superiority of the British. The British soldiers, led by Rawson, found a city plunged into chaos. The streets, once vibrant with the daily life and culture of Benin, became a scene of destruction as the British forces penetrated the heart of the city. Systematic looting was unleashed. The masterpieces of Benin craftsmanship, which had been symbols of pride and power, were ruthlessly destroyed and stolen. How was it possible for such a prosperous kingdom, with such a rich history, to fall in this manner? The looting of the city of Benin was not only an act of military aggression, it was the beginning of an era of humiliation and dispossession. The capture of the city had devastating consequences, not only for its inhabitants who witnessed their home and culture being dismantled, but also for the very history of the kingdom. The works of art, which represented centuries of tradition and mastery, were sent to museums and private collections in Europe, stripping the people of their legacy. As the British consolidated their control over the city, Oba Ovonramwen hid in the jungle, trying to escape the fate that loomed over his kingdom. The fall of the city of Benin marked the end of a chapter in the history of Africa, an echo of a time when the Kingdom of Benin had been a beacon of civilization and culture. But was this capitulation the only option available to the people of Benin? What secrets and truths remained buried in the ruins of the city? The consequences of this attack would resonate in the region for decades. The cultural resistance of the people of Benin would be put to the test, and the looting of their artistic heritage would become a symbol of colonial greed. The story of the fall of the city of Benin is ultimately a reminder of the fragility of civilizations and the devastating impact that unchecked ambition can have on the culture and identity of a people. The capture and looting of the city of Benin not only signaled the military defeat of a kingdom, they also opened the door to a series of events that would lead to the exile of its last leader, Oba Ovonramwen, and the restructuring of its cultural identity. In the next chapter, we will explore the fate of the Oba and the story of his exile, a journey that will take us through the labyrinths of memory and cultural resistance in a time of darkness. The fall of the capital would soon manifest itself in a more dramatic way, leading the Kingdom of Benin into one of the darkest chapters of its history. In the twilight of the 19th century, the kingdom, known for its splendor and cultural sophistication, found itself at the crossroads of external and internal forces that threatened to destabilize its legacy. The echoes of British colonization began to resonate within the walls of the city of Benin, and amidst this turmoil, one man stood out: Oba Ovonramwen. Oba Ovonramwen, also known as Ovonramwen Nogbaisi, ascended to the throne in 1888 at a time when his kingdom faced a growing challenge. European influence, especially British, was rapidly intensifying. Tensions between colonial authorities and the kingdom were escalating, creating an atmosphere of uncertainty and distrust. Ovonramwen, the last Oba before colonization, found himself caught between the desire to preserve the autonomy of his people and the pressure from an empire that knew no bounds. The British, driven by their territorial and economic ambitions, had begun to establish a network of control that threatened to strip Benin of its sovereignty. In this context, Ovonramwen's decisions were crucial. Despite his desire to maintain the integrity of the kingdom, the Oba chose to respond to British provocations with resistance rather than yielding to their demands. This decision, although understandable from his perspective, would lead to devastating consequences. As tensions intensified, the Oba faced a series of internal challenges. Factions within his court, some of whom advocated for greater openness towards the British, began to question his leadership. However, Ovonramwen, with a deep sense of his role as protector of the people, refused to compromise. The shadow of betrayal loomed over his government, and the murmurs of discontent grew louder. The climax of this story of resistance was reached in 1897, when British forces, using the pretext of an alleged offence to their dignity, launched a punitive expedition that would culminate in the capture of the city of Benin. The siege was brutal. The British troops, well armed and organised, broke through the kingdom's defences, leaving a trail of destruction and death in their wake. The Oba, trapped in his palace, realised that his kingdom was about to fall. That night, the city that had been a beacon of culture and power became a battlefield. The capture of the city of Benin was only the beginning of a series of events that would forever change the history of the region. Ovonramwen, in a final attempt to protect his people, made the decision to flee. In an act of desperation, he became a fugitive in his own country, leaving behind his throne and his home. The Oba's flight into the jungle, a place where the shadows of the trees had witnessed so many royal ceremonies, became a symbol of resistance against an inevitable fate. But could he truly escape the history unfolding around him? Ovonramwen's exile marked the end of an era. Captured shortly after his flight, the Oba was taken to Calabar, where he was treated both as a prisoner and as a figure of interest. The image of the Oba, a leader of an ancient kingdom now reduced to an exile, resonated deeply in the collective memory of his people. In his absence, the British seized the cultural treasures of Benin, dispersing its artworks and history around the world as a reminder of their power. The consequences of this exile were profound. Ovonramwen's authority was replaced by a colonial administration that stripped the people of their autonomy and culture. The resistance that had characterized his reign faded away, and with it the legacy of the Kingdom of Benin was threatened. The echo of his resistance still resonates in the collective memory, but to what extent can the spirit of a leader endure through time? The enigma that lingers in the air is deep. What legacy did Ovonramwen leave in a kingdom that, after his exile, would face resistance and cultural adaptation under British rule? How could his decisions, made in a moment of desperation, shape the identity of his people in the future? The answers to these questions lie in the following chapters, where we will explore the looting of Benin's treasures and the cultural impact of colonization on the identity of the people of Benin. The fall of the kingdom not only left marks on the structures of power, but also triggered a series of events that would forever change the fate of the artworks and culture of the Kingdom of Benin. In a context where culture and identity were intertwined with every piece of art, the looting of 1997 would become a grim echo of a history that still resonates in the present. In the last decade of the 19th century, the Kingdom of Benin faced a climate of increasing tension with the British Empire. Britain's colonial ambitions clashed with the rich cultural heritage and independence that Benin had maintained for centuries. The punitive expedition that resulted in the capture of the city of Benin was not merely a military action. It was a direct attack on the very essence of the kingdom. Benin, a place where every bronze sculpture, every mask and every relief told ancestral stories, became embroiled in a conflict that would transform its cultural legacy into an object of desire for colonizers. The artistic treasures of the Kingdom of Benin, which had mostly been created under the supervision of the Obas, such as Ovonramwen, became spoils. Each piece, from the exquisite bronze statues to the elaborate ivory reliefs, was a testament to human ingenuity, a legacy that had defied time. However, the fury of war brought with it a shadow of destruction and dispersion. The decisions made by British leaders, specifically the governor of the Lagos colony, Sir Harry Rawson, were crucial. The order to loot the city was swift and brutal. With an armed and determined army, the British ravaged the capital, stripping the palaces and temples of their most cherished treasures. As the soldiers advanced into the city, the echoes of the cries of citizens witnessing the dismantling of their culture reverberated in the dirt streets. How had a civilization so rich in history and art been allowed to end up in such a vulnerable state? The masterpieces that were extracted from the city of Benin not only reflected the technical skill of the kingdom's artists, but also carried deep meanings linked to rituals, beliefs, and everyday life. The bronze mask of the king, the reliefs depicting ancestors, each object became a symbol of resistance but also of loss. The dispersion of these pieces to museums and private collections around the world opened a new chapter in the narrative of African art. But at a devastating cost. The immediate consequences of the looting were profound. The artworks became a symbol of cultural appropriation, a reminder of the violence inflicted upon a people and their history. The Benin community was marked not only by the physical loss of their heritage, but also by the emotional and psychological impact of seeing their culture treated as a mere object of interest for the Western world. Questions began to arise among the people of Benin. Could their story ever be told fairly? Would it be possible to reclaim their cultural identity in a world that seemed to have forgotten them? The enigma of the looting of the treasures of Benin remains. As historians and archaeologists investigate the impact of these events, new questions emerge. What secrets lie behind each looted work? What stories of resistance and strength do the pieces that still remain scattered across the world tell us? As the echo of the footsteps of the looters fades, the quest to understand and reclaim the legacy of the Kingdom of Benin continues. As the world confronts its colonial history, the vision of a future where Benin's culture is recognized and celebrated gains strength. With the looting and dispersion of its treasures, the British colonial administration prepared to restructure the region, a chapter that we will explore in the next segment of our journey. What new realities would arise from the ashes of ancient glory? The devastation of the looting would give way to a series of drastic changes in the power structure and daily life of the people of Benin. The fall of the Kingdom of Benin in 1897, marked by the destruction of its capital. Benin City, by British forces, laid the groundwork for a colonial administration that would radically transform the region. This chapter explores how the British, in their quest to consolidate control, reorganized the territory and governed the region, facing a cultural legacy that resisted being erased. At the beginning of British rule, the political atmosphere was imbued with tensions. The resistance of local leaders was palpable. But the devastation of the punitive expedition had left many in a state of shock. The figure of Oba Ovonramwen, the last sovereign of the kingdom, had become a symbol of resistance, although his exile and the consequent dissolution of the traditional monarchy seemed to have sealed the fate of the people. In this context, the British, under the mandate of the colonial government, began to implement a series of administrative reforms aimed at establishing an order that, according to them, would guarantee stability and progress. One of the key figures in this process was Captain Herbert Macaulay, a colonial official who played a crucial role in the restructuring of the administration. His approach was pragmatic, as he knew that effective control of the region required not only military force, but also a network of local collaborators. Thus, a system of indirect governance was established where traditional authorities, in an attempt to maintain peace, were co-opted by the British. This strategy, although effective in the short term, sowed the seeds of deep resentment among local leaders and their communities. The development of these events was marked by decisions that would forever change the history of Benin. In 1899, the British officially proclaimed the Protectorate of Benin, which became part of the Lagos colony. The new administration imposed taxes and regulations that affected the local economy, altering the ancient systems of exchange and trade that had been the backbone of the kingdom for centuries. The British, with their Eurocentric vision of progress, dismissed the rich cultural and economic tradition of Benin, viewing it as an obstacle to their modernization agenda. The immediate consequences were severe. The population, which had known a system of governance based on the authority of the Oba, found itself plunged into administrative chaos. New laws were imposed without consulting local communities, leading to growing frustration and discontent. Tensions between the British and the local population intensified, and the echoes of resistance began to resonate in the streets of Benin City. Did the British underestimate the strength of the cultural legacy they sought to eradicate? However, the enigma of this chapter lies not only in the resistance of the inhabitants of Benin, but also in how the British colonial administration left indelible marks on the identity of the region. Despite attempts to strip the people of their culture and traditions, many elements of this legacy persisted, challenging the imposed narratives. The question that lingers is, how did the history of British colonial administration in Benin influence the cultural resistance that still endures today? As the people of Benin faced the loss of their autonomy, a cultural resistance began to take shape that, although silenced by colonial rule, never ceased to pulse in the hearts of its people. In the next chapter, we will delve into this cultural resistance, exploring the ways in which the people of Benin fought to maintain their identity amid colonial oppression. What secrets and rituals emerged from the shadows in this time of adversity? The shadow of oppression that loomed over the Kingdom of Benin following the punitive expedition of 1897 not only resulted in the loss of political power, but also became an unprecedented test of cultural resilience. British colonization, with its eagerness to impose its own culture and its attempt to erase the past, encountered a people determined to preserve their identity, an echo of a legacy that refused to fade away. As colonial rule took hold, the culture of the people of Benin transformed into a bastion of resistance, a living testament to a history that refused to be silenced. The political and social context of this chapter is situated at a crossroads. Following the fall of the city of Benin, the British imposed a colonial regime that, although seeking to establish its own culture and order, could not extinguish the spirit of the people of Benin. The British administration, led by figures such as the governor of the colony of Nigeria, Sir Ralph Moore, aimed to reorganize the social and political structure of the region, imposing a system of governance that disregarded local traditions and customs. But what happens when a culture faces the threat of extinction? Can a legacy that has been rooted in the identity of a people for centuries truly disappear? As the British implemented their rule, local elites, although stripped of their political power, began to make key decisions to preserve their cultural identity. Among them was Oba Ovonramwen, whose resistance, although it ended in exile, left a profound impact on collective memory. While British power consolidated, the communities of Benin organized in secret, creating spaces where their culture could flourish. In clandestine ceremonies, traditions, music, dances and art that were the soul of the Kingdom of Benin were kept alive. The art of bronze, which had reached an unparalleled level of sophistication, became a symbol of resistance, even though many of these treasures were looted and scattered around the world. The development of these events was not linear. Amidst oppression, figures such as Reverend Samuel Johnson emerged, a scholar from Benin who, through his work, The History of the Kingdom of Benin, sought to document and preserve the history and culture of his people in a context that threatened to erase them. His work reflected not only a desire to remember, but also a declaration of resistance in a time of crisis. Through his writings, bridges were established between the past and the present, creating a narrative that reclaimed the greatness of the Kingdom of Benin in the face of colonial onslaught. The immediate consequences of this cultural resistance were remarkable. Despite repression, cultural elements began to resurface in the daily lives of the people of Benin. Music and dance, although suppressed, found ways to manifest. Festivities celebrating the history and myths of ancestors became acts of defiance, where the people reaffirmed their identity amidst a hostile landscape. The creation of secret societies, such as the Ayo, allowed the youth to connect with their roots, promoting a sense of community and belonging that transcended the barriers imposed by colonizers. However, the central enigma of this cultural resistance lies in the question: could a culture truly survive colonial domination? How much of its essence could remain intact in the face of forced assimilation and the loss of its leaders? The history of the Kingdom of Benin thus becomes a mystery, a puzzle where each piece represents the struggle of a people for their identity and their legacy, an echo that resonates through time. As we explore the depths of this resistance, it becomes evident that the legacy of the Kingdom of Benin is found not only in its artworks and traditions, but also in the constant struggle for dignity and memory. This chapter invites us to reflect on the human capacity to adapt, resist, and ultimately preserve culture even in the darkest moments of history. With the echo of this cultural resistance still reverberating, we prepare to delve into the next chapter, the legacy of the Kingdom of Benin. There we will unravel how the influence of this kingdom has endured and transformed within contemporary Nigerian culture and society, opening a new chapter in the history of a people that never ceased to fight. This cultural resistance not only preserved the identity of a people marked by colonialism, but also laid the foundations for a legacy that would endure through generations. In this chapter, we delve into the lasting influence of the Kingdom of Benin on contemporary Nigerian culture and society, a legacy that resonates in every corner of the nation and challenges time itself. The historical context surrounding the Kingdom of Benin is complex and remarkable. Despite the fall of the capital in 1897 and the subsequent British colonial administration, the spirit of the kingdom did not extinguish. Instead of disappearing, it emerged as a persistent echo in the fabric of the Nigerian nation, as Nigeria consolidated itself as a nation-state in the 20th century. The roots of Benin intertwined with national identity, creating a cultural mosaic where the history of the kingdom became a symbol of resistance and pride. The key figures in this cultural renaissance are numerous. From intellectuals and artists to community leaders, each played a crucial role in the re-evaluation of the legacy of Benin. One of the most prominent names is that of Oba Akinzuwa II, who, through his efforts, fostered a cultural revival that sought to reclaim lost traditions and assert the history of the people of Benin. His reign became a bridge between the past and the future, where the history of the kingdom was used as a tool to strengthen Nigerian identity. The decisions made by these leaders were not mere symbolic actions. They were concrete steps towards the revitalization of traditions and culture, the creation of cultural institutions, and the promotion of education about the history of the Kingdom of Benin became fundamental pillars for the formation of a national consciousness. The arts, in particular, played a central role in this process. The techniques of sculpture and goldsmithing, which were once the pride of the kingdom, began to flourish again, inspiring a new generation of artists who sought to channel the rich cultural heritage of Benin into their works. The development of these events was not limited to the artistic realm. It also reflected in the social and political sphere. Nigeria's independence in 1960 and the subsequent search for a cohesive national identity led to a resurgence of cultural pride. Traditional festivals, which had been relegated to the background during colonial rule, began to come alive once more. Ceremonies such as the Igi, which celebrates the spiritual connection of the people of Benin with their ancestors, became an affirmation of identity and continuity. However, despite this renaissance, the path was not without challenges. How to reconcile the rich history of the Kingdom of Benin with the contemporary realities of a diverse and multicultural Nigeria? The question lingers in the air, like an echo of the dilemmas facing the nation. While some advocate for the preservation of Benin's traditions, others suggest that modernization demands a constant evolution of culture. The tensions between the old and the new, between tradition and innovation, become the backdrop of this enigmatic legacy. The immediate consequences of this cultural revitalization have manifested in a growing interest in the art and history of the Kingdom of Benin worldwide. The masterpieces of bronze sculpture, which once adorned the walls of the palaces of Benin, have found a place in international museums, while narratives about the kingdom have begun to take shape in contemporary literature, film, and music. This interest is not only a testament to the power of art, but also an invitation to explore the complexities of Nigerian history. Yet, the mystery that persists is deep and complex. What secrets still lie hidden in the shadows of the history of the Kingdom of Benin? How many narratives have been forgotten or distorted over time? The echo of these questions resonates in the hearts of those seeking a deeper connection with their legacy. The stories of resistance, of the struggle for identity, and of a people who refuse to be forgotten are just some of the pieces of a much larger puzzle. As we delve into the next chapter, the return of the bronzes of Benin, we will explore the international efforts to recover the looted artworks and the impact this has on contemporary Nigerian cultural identity. This journey will not only reveal the importance of these lost treasures, but will also raise new questions about restitution, memory, and the future of a legacy that remains alive in the heart of the Nigerian people. The cultural renaissance would give way to a new chapter in the history of the Kingdom of Benin, one marked by the echo of the artworks that once adorned its capital. The bronzes of Benin, silent witnesses of a glorious legacy, had been stripped from their home, taken to distant lands as trophies of conquest and symbols of colonial power. However, in recent decades, a growing movement has begun to take shape, an international effort to return these masterpieces to their place of origin. In this chapter, we will explore the historical context surrounding these efforts, the key figures who have driven the cause, and the events that have marked a turning point in the narrative of looted art. Historical context. The 19th century was a period of dramatic transformation for the Kingdom of Benin, a kingdom that had flourished for centuries due to its art, culture, and political power. The punitive expedition of 1897, led by the British Empire, not only resulted in the devastation of the city of Benin, but also translated into the plundering of its cultural treasures. The bronzes, which represented the artistic skill and identity of the people of Benin, were taken to museums and private collections in Europe, where they remained for over a century. These events not only marked a physical loss of heritage, but also became a symbol of colonial injustice. As the world moved towards the 21st century, awareness of the importance of cultural heritage and the restitution of these objects began to take shape. Key figures and decisions. Among the most prominent actors in this struggle for restitution are figures such as the Oba of Benin, Eweka II, who has been a fervent advocate for the cause. Since his ascension to the throne in 2016, he has worked tirelessly to establish dialogues with international institutions, claiming not only the bronzes but also the recognition of the cultural value of his people. On the western side, museums such as the British Museum and the Natural History Museum in London have begun to face growing pressures and demands for restitution. However, the response has been varied, with some museums willing to collaborate and others still hesitant to return the artifacts, raising questions about ownership and conservation. Development of events. In 2010, an important milestone was celebrated when the City Museum of Stuttgart in Germany returned a Benin bronze known as the Head. This gesture marked the beginning of a series of negotiations and collaborations between museums and the Nigerian government. In 2019, the Portland Art Museum also returned an object of notable importance, and other museums began to follow suit. However, the path to complete restitution has been fraught with challenges. Questions about the authenticity of claims and ownership rights intertwine with discussions about the preservation of cultural heritage in a global context. The COVID-19 pandemic, while bringing a temporary standstill to many activities, also allowed the emergence of new digital platforms and online debates about cultural restitution. Activists and scholars began to advocate for the return of artifacts not only as an act of justice but as a way to heal the wounds of colonialism. Social media became a stage where the voices of descendants of looted peoples cried out for restitution, forcing museums to rethink their acquisition and conservation policies. Immediate consequences. Recent initiatives have begun to generate a palpable change in the perception of African art in the global context. Governments of several countries have started to pressure museums to return stolen objects, and the international community has begun to recognize the importance of restitution as a step towards reconciliation. However, the question persists: what happens to the works that still remain in private collections? The struggle for restitution has become a symbol of cultural resistance, an echo of a past that, although painful, seeks to be reclaimed. The enigma of the chapter. As efforts to return the bronzes of Benin continue, a troubling question arises. Will it be possible to fully restore the cultural legacy that was lost during the colonial period? The history of the restitution of these artifacts intertwines with the identity of the people of Benin and their history, and each return represents a step towards the recovery of a heritage that has been, for too long, an enigma in the shadows of history. Against the backdrop of these efforts, we find ourselves at a critical point in the narrative. The struggle for the restitution of the bronzes of Benin is not just about recovering objects, but about restoring the dignity and identity of a people. The story is far from over, and as we move towards the next chapter, we will delve into current initiatives to rediscover and preserve the rich history and heritage of the Kingdom of Benin on a journey that promises to reveal hidden secrets and forgotten legacies. What else does the future hold in this quest for truth and cultural justice? The search to recover what was lost would soon flourish in a context marked by the heritage and legacy of the Kingdom of Benin, as the echo of history resonated among the shadows of collective memory. Initiatives to rediscover and preserve its rich cultural heritage began to take shape. In a world where narratives have been distorted by centuries of colonialism and looting, the drive to reclaim the history of Benin transformed into an act of resistance and a call for reconciliation. Throughout the 20th century, as the Kingdom of Benin sank into oblivion, the political and social environment of Nigeria underwent drastic changes. Nigeria's independence in 1960 marked a turning point in the struggle for cultural identity. The narrative of official history was questioned, and the Nigerian people, especially the Edo, began to rethink their place in a globalized world. The fight for cultural dignity intertwined with the desire to recover their heritage, not only in terms of material objects such as the bronzes, but also of their history, their art, and their traditions. In this context, key figures emerged who played a crucial role in the revaluation of the Kingdom of Benin. Among them, Oba Ovonramwen, who ascended to the throne in 1979, became a symbol of cultural resistance. Under his leadership, significant efforts were initiated to promote education about the history of the Kingdom of Benin, as well as to advance Edo art and culture. But what decisions did the leaders make to reconcile the past with the present? What concrete steps were taken to revitalize interest in Benin's heritage? One of the most notable initiatives was the creation of museums and cultural centers. The National Museum of Benin, inaugurated in 1973, became a meeting point for researchers and history enthusiasts. Here, not only the bronzes of Benin were exhibited, but also a variety of artifacts that told the story of a kingdom that had been, for centuries, a beacon of civilization in Africa. However, the creation of these spaces was not without controversy. The struggle for the repatriation of the bronzes of Benin, which were located in European museums, intensified, becoming a symbol of historical justice. Could the recovery of these artifacts heal the wounds of the past? As the decades progressed, interest in the art and culture of Benin expanded beyond its borders. Contemporary artists, influenced by the rich tradition of their heritage, began to emerge on the international scene. The connection to the past became more palpable through exhibitions that celebrated the art of Benin. From bronze sculptures to sophisticated cotton textiles, These cultural initiatives sought not only to preserve the legacy but also to reinterpret it, integrating old stories into new narratives. Yet, amid this cultural resurgence, a troubling question arose. How can the authenticity of a heritage that has been so deeply affected by history be preserved? The development of these events had immediate consequences for the cultural identity of the Edo and their perception both nationally and internationally. The revitalization of interest in the Kingdom of Benin fostered a sense of pride among local communities, who began to reclaim their heritage and challenge colonial narratives. The younger generations, empowered by this new knowledge, began to actively participate in the preservation of their history, organizing cultural festivals and promoting local art. However, this renaissance also posed challenges, as globalization and the commercialization of art threatened to dilute the essence of what it meant to be part of Benin's culture. As the chapter of rediscovery and preservation unfolded, the enigma persisted. Could the people of Benin truly reconcile their glorious past with an uncertain future? The search for answers became a shared journey, where historical memory intertwined with contemporary identity. In this journey, each step taken towards the recovery of cultural heritage was, at the same time, an act of affirmation and an invitation to reflect on the meaning of heritage. As the echo of these initiatives still resonates in the present, an inevitable transition towards the next stage of our narrative is posed. The art and culture of the Kingdom of Benin transcend its borders, impacting the world in unexpected and profound ways. In the next chapter, we will explore how this influence has manifested in global art and culture, leaving an indelible mark on the shared history of humanity. Cultural resistance not only preserved the identity of the people of Benin, but also allowed the art and history of the kingdom to filter into the outside world, challenging prevailing narratives and revealing a rich and complex heritage. In this context of rebirth, the artistic legacy of Benin emerged as a resonant echo in the fabric of global culture, weaving unexpected connections that endure to this day. As we delve into the current chapter, it is essential to understand the political and social environment that preceded this global influence. The arrival of the British in the 19th century marked a turning point. The punitive expedition of 1897 not only resulted in the fall of the city of Benin and the exile of Oba Ovonramwen, but also unleashed a wave of interest in Benin art in Europe. The bronzes, sculptures and reliefs, which had previously been symbols of power and reverence, began to be seen as artistic objects. The key figures in this narrative are diverse. On the British side, figures such as Captain Herbert Macaulay, responsible for the military operation, and explorer Richard Lander, whose descriptions of the kingdom had sparked curiosity, played decisive roles in the history of Benin. On the other hand, Oba Ovonramwen himself, whose resistance and leadership became a symbol of the struggle for autonomy, represents the voice of a people who refused to fade into the shadow of colonization. In the years following the fall of the kingdom, Benin art began to be exhibited in European museums, such as the British Museum and the Natural History Museum in Paris. These exhibitions, while celebrating the technical mastery of Benin artisans, also fueled a colonial discourse that stripped these works of their cultural context. With each object that crossed borders, a part of the soul of Benin was lost, and art became a commodity, devoid of its original history and meaning. But was it really so? Could Benin art, when exposed in a new context, have maintained its essence, generating intercultural dialogue? The development of these events revealed an intriguing paradox. As Benin art dispersed, its influence began to resonate in the global arena. Artists from various parts of the world, from the arts and crafts movement in Britain to modernism in America, were drawn to the unique aesthetics of Benin works. The lost wax technique, decorative motifs, and the representation of human and animal figures began to inspire creators seeking to break away from European traditions and explore new forms of expression. Through the eyes of these artists, Benin art transformed into a symbol of resistance and authenticity, a legacy that challenged conventions and celebrated cultural diversity. The immediate consequences of this influence were profound. In the realm of contemporary art, works inspired by Benin began to appear in galleries and international exhibitions, challenging the notion of aesthetic superiority that had prevailed for centuries. In Africa, the rediscovery of the cultural wealth of the Kingdom of Benin fostered a renewed sense of pride and belonging among communities, inspiring new generations to revalue their history and heritage. However, this artistic revitalization also raised difficult questions. What did it really mean for the people of Benin that their art became a symbol of global resistance while they continued to fight for the restitution of their cultural treasures? The enigma that arises from this narrative is complex. How can art so deeply rooted in a specific cultural context transcend its borders and become a global phenomenon? What secrets remain hidden in the works that have traveled through time and space? As we explore these questions, we enter a territory where the past and present intertwine, revealing a legacy that belongs not only to Benin but to the entire world. The story of the influence of the art and culture of the Kingdom of Benin on the global stage does not end here. As we move toward the next stage of our journey, we will reflect on the lessons that the past offers us and their relevance in the modern world. What does the rich heritage of the Kingdom of Benin teach us about identity, resistance, and the power of art? What is the future of this legacy in the contemporary context? The answers to these questions await us in the next chapter, where we will explore reflections on the past and future of a kingdom that, despite adversities, continues to resonate in the echo of history. In the twilight of the history of the Kingdom of Benin, where the shadow of its splendor still resonates in the streets of present-day Edo, we find ourselves at a moment of profound reflection. The fall of the kingdom, marked by the punitive expedition of 1997 and the subsequent looting of its treasures, is not merely a tale of loss, but also a persistent echo that invites us to examine the lessons that can still be drawn from its rich history. The legacy of the Kingdom of Benin transcends its time and place, becoming a beacon of teachings and warnings for the modern world. The historical context surrounding the Kingdom of Benin is one of intrigue and complexities. As European powers expanded their influence in Africa, the region of present-day Nigeria became a melting pot of cultures, conflicts, and alliances. The Kingdom of Benin, with its sophisticated political and social structure, faced challenges both internal and external. The arrival of the British was not just an isolated event, it represented the culmination of centuries of trade, diplomacy, and at the same time tensions. In this environment, the leaders of the kingdom, especially Oba Ovonramwen, had to make critical decisions that would determine the fate of their people. Ovonramwen, a powerful and astute king, understood that resistance to British control required not only military strength but also a deep understanding of international dynamics. However, his attempts to maintain the kingdom's independence were thwarted by the imperial ambitions of the United Kingdom, which sought to consolidate its control over the region's trade. Through diplomatic and military decisions, Ovonramwen tried to preserve the autonomy of his kingdom, but colonial power became increasingly unavoidable. Could he have made different decisions? Could he have found a path toward coexistence? The development of these events culminated in the expedition of 1997, an occurrence that would seal the fate of the Kingdom of Benin. The British incursion, under the pretext of a punitive mission, resulted in the capture of the city of Benin, a place that had been the beating heart of a vibrant civilization. The subsequent looting not only stripped the kingdom of its material wealth, but also signified the loss of its cultural identity. The bronzes of Benin, which narrated the story of a rich and complex culture, were scattered across the world, leaving the people of Benin with a void that would resonate for generations. The immediate consequences of these events were devastating. The British colonial administration restructured the territory, imposing a new order that ignored the traditions and history of the people of Benin. Cultural resistance, although persistent, faced a system that sought to erase the legacy of the Kingdom of Benin. However, even amid oppression, movements emerged that sought to keep alive the history and cultural identity of the people. The question that arises is, what legacy can be built from the ashes of a fallen kingdom? As we delve into the enigma that represents the legacy of the Kingdom of Benin, it is essential to recognize that its history is not confined to a distant past. The lessons learned from its experience are relevant in the contemporary world, where the echoes of colonialism and the struggle for cultural identity remain alive. The quest for historical justice, as evidenced by the efforts for the return of the bronzes of Benin, raises questions about collective memory and the responsibilities we have toward the past. How can we reconcile the wounds of history with the need to move toward an inclusive future? The legacy of the Kingdom of Benin also manifests in the richness of its culture and art, which continues to inspire artists and scholars around the world. The masterpieces that once adorned its palaces are now found in distant museums, but their impact is felt in the way we interpret and value cultural diversity in the modern era. The history of Benin reminds us that culture is not merely an artifact of the past, but a bridge to the future. What role will the voices of indigenous communities play in narrating their own stories? At the end of this journey through time, it is crucial to reflect on the future. The Kingdom of Benin, despite its fall, offers us a model of resilience and cultural resistance. It invites us to question the role of history in shaping our contemporary identity and to recognize the importance of preserving and honoring the stories that have, for too long, remained in the shadows. What secrets still await in the depths of our collective memory? Thus, as we close this chapter, we must not forget that the past and the future are intrinsically connected. The history of the Kingdom of Benin is an invitation to contemplate not only what we have lost, but also what we can still learn. As each of us seeks to understand our place in the world, let us remember that, like the ancient bronze sculptures that once told stories of greatness, our own narratives are fundamental to building a future where all legacies are valued and respected. In the echo of its greatness, the Kingdom of Benin leaves us a clear message. History is a mirror, and through it we can glimpse the light of a brighter future.